is buffer time? What is buffer time? Is what buffer time?
Hello again, Buffer Timers. This week, Buffer Time means the Bell Riots, the happiest of times in Star Trek. And before we get into this, let's go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Dustin from Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
I'm Ren from Ren Rants.
I'm Scott from Opinions No One Cares About. Tonight I'm a peaceful protester.
I'm Josh from Windgrace, otherwise known as a ghost.
And my name is Vanessa, and I have a YouTube channel called I Love Bad Star Trek.
Okay, so before we get into the topic at hand, there's at least 4 pieces of news here. The first being that Academy is finally in actual filming production. Got that, I think, yesterday. Cast looks pretty interesting. I'm a little, I'm kind of wondering why Mary Wiseman's the only one that's not part of this picture, because she was confirmed to be part of it. I mean, we even get Bob Picardo in here, and he's supposedly just going to be a minor part.
That's interesting.
Maybe they were busy. It looks like some kind of press thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope Mary Wiseman isn't, like, taking a back seat, because, I mean, I'm silly for Tilly.
That would be such a waste.
Well, okay, I'll save that one for last. This looks really interesting. These new Lower Decks comics coming up. Badgie and Moopsy, fucking, I am 1,000% on board. I'm not into the Trek comics, but I've got to get that.
I would also recommend, sorry to interrupt, but I would also recommend anybody check out the previously released Lower Decks comics. I had the privilege and honor of getting to review those for someone, and they were a joy all around.
I've got one of the graphic novels with like where they get Dracula on the holodeck. I can't remember the name of it. That was a good one.
It's so
I
good.
haven't read any of them. I need to check them out.
And then when they bring Shax into like live action characterization in one of them, it's weird.
Oh.
He like joins the crew of Cisco's ship, the Theseus or something, but he's like,
oh, is that during the like DS9 ones with Cisco? Is that what you're
sort
talking
of,
about? Or is
yeah.
that a Lower Decks comic?
No, but they bring him in, but they draw him more like a standard Star Trek character.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Cool. I have no idea.
I also really enjoy the way that they characterize Mariner in here, because she's not just like chaotic, amoral, just kind of doing whatever, stealing ships without any sort of repercussions or anything. Like the dynamic is what I would hope from the show. So
Cool. Another really minor piece here that a little late to the party, but nothing, I suppose. You're going to get some Picard Funko Pops.
I already have a card in his TNG uniform.
Yeah, I don't think I'm interested in any of these. If I would want Rios, and clearly these are from season 3 without Rios.
Brother.
I would want
Data? What?
I would want Dodge or somebody like Girardi Borg.
Oh,
that
hell
would
yeah.
be the one.
Ooh.
Orgati.
I'd take it all more.
Frick yeah. All right, so the last piece of news is something kind of dear and near to us here on Buffer Time. There's going to be a Buffer Time card game by the end of the year.
Oh, hell yeah. I love tabletop games.
Maybe we can do figure out how to do this long distance and play for the
That would
stream
be
or
so
something.
fun.
But I really enjoy like reviewing things as they're being used versus just someone giving an opinion.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to make it work like that. I hope so, but I think that this might be a little difficult with cards.
Right, but it looks really interesting.
Definitely going to get it back.
Just everyone be on the honor system.
There are some Star Trek games, and the I probably right now in Humble Bundle, if anybody's into the RPGs or like paper and pencil RPGs, you can get 36 of the Star Trek RPG books for $25,
Oh wow.
including the Lower Decks one. I've gotten most of them a while back. I'm almost considering getting this pack just for the Lower Decks book because I don't have it. Okay, I think that's all for news before we get into the rest of this, unless anybody else knows of anything.
I have a question, and maybe
Yeah.
this was answered previously with Paramount sort of collapsing. Where is the Starfleet Academy going to be filmed?
Toronto sets are already, it's the biggest
I
set
see.
ever built for Star Trek.
Wow.
I'd seen somebody today like, oh, I don't really want Star Trek 90210. And I'm like, well, you're probably going to get a minimum of 2 seasons because if they
Plus-
spent the amount of time and money on this huge set that they claim,
It
We're
doesn't
gonna
look
have-
like they're casting 35 and 40-year-olds to play teenagers either. So,
Yeah, that's
at
nice.
least we'll be spared
It's going
that.
on in too low.
I
But
do
what I
want to
will
see
say-
Robert Picardo going to class, though.
though on the other side of that, it does seem like the majority of the cast that we know of are older people. I mean, look at this. What is there? Only 4 or 5 people under the age of 30?
Fair.
Yeah.
And granted, some of them are production, like Kurtzman's in there. I see Olentande.
Might be a
Also-
good mix. Like half
Also,
and
like
half.
in Starfleet, like you're probably going back to the academy to sort of like expand your knowledge. Like if you, I don't know exactly what ranking these folks are going to have, but maybe they're not going to be all cadets, is what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, some of them are going to be teachers and things. But then again, like I'd said earlier, where's Mary Wiseman? Because she better be on here.
Was Holly Hunter even in that picture?
Yeah, she was. She was sitting
Yeah.
down.
Was she? Okay.
Yeah, she's kind of hard to see. She blends in with the people behind her, but she's right next to Paul Giamatti, dead
Oh,
center.
okay.
Like her first teaching assignment ended up with somebody dying. So, I think she has a little bit to prove.
Oops.
So
Yep.
I don't
Not wrong. Okay, let's do what we're here to do, and that's riot. So the first question is kind of these first couple will be kind of softball questions.
Okay.
Is the method of time travel that we see here the dumbest timey-wimey time travel stuff in Trek?
Yes.
I feel like that's a high bar. There's a lot of very silly time travel stuff that happens, but this definitely has to be up there.
Yeah.
I think that they tried too hard to explain it. If they had just done it and not tried for the explanation, it probably would have been better.
I do always love some chronotons, though.
Yeah, O'Brien's technobabble was pulling a lot of weight.
It is some of the most technobabble in the franchise, and it's too bad because I mean this is, for me at least, a top 20 episode in the entire franchise, and
Oh yeah.
it has a
think-
couple of weak moments like this.
I think it was the sort of, they realized exactly how dark and how this was going to go in terms of like what Cisco and Bashir are up against. So they sort of tried to counterbalance it with this sort of zany thing. They kind of do it all the way with Ferengi episodes,
Yeah.
but here it seems tonally. It's like they sort of weaved an A and B plot that maybe weren't necessarily written together. I don't know what the writing process was, but it does seem kind of glued on. It reminds me a lot of like TOS, honestly, where you just have like very superficial indicators of time, like people barreling out of like a speakeasy, or the flowers being
And in TOS, you've got 2 different episodes where the time travel happened before the episode even started, and they just drop you into it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It just like had that kind of silly tone to me. more than exactly like replicating what TOS did with time travel. It was just sort of like not taking itself as seriously as the main plot. So it just felt very like glued on a little bit, but I kind of dug it because with Kira, you know, going in like human drag, they could have just they could have like done her nose. Hi, Norman. They could have just redone her nose, but I guess because Bashir wasn't aboard, they put like a band-aid on it, and they were like, just break it.
Every
It's
time I
fucking
see this, I
rag.
just go for that oh, my
I thought that
nose
was
from the Brady Bunch.
yes, I thought that was so silly because they could have easily I could have easily just given her like a human nose or something. But it's almost like it's similar in tone to like if somebody was a drag queen, like a cis man in woman drag, but then putting boy drag on top of that. Like it's really absurd because they could have just taken the prosthetic off anyway. I just thought that was silly.
But
And
it's also the
Odo was there.
Yeah. But it's also the setup. They're like trying to explain this whole thing, and O'Brien's like, "Oh no, I just found this random quantum singularity that was just passing through and messed with everything." And fortunately, we've been accumulating time travel particles on the ship.
Just by Earth, no big deal.
I
Not a
just like
problem.
that they had no regard for like transporting in front of people. Like that was just very, very silly. Like integrity of the timeline. Who? Like, what are you doing?
Well, they didn't really have a choice there. They just like they set it to recall him after the certain amount of time, and that was that.
But they just like stood there accepting flowers. They could have like tried to hide behind the van. I don't know.
Like I guess because it's San Francisco, it's difficult to pick a place that isn't in public
Yeah. That's
or
true.
in front of other people. So they ended up at this exact same spot, and the vehicle in front of the basement bar or whatever just kept changing, and the music that came it was just so silly.
Yeah, I had this for a question for later, but I guess we can just like finish off our talk about it. What do you think about this whole thing where they keep beaming down and it's like the same actors in different outfits and different
You
time
was the same
periods?
actor.
Silly and fun.
It was fine. I mean, it wasn't too serious, but it was fun.
It's just basically saying, "Oh, are we in the right time? No, we're not in the right time." Almost a little
Yeah.
bit.
So I'm almost
would-
curious, was this a one-part episode that they expanded to two, and then this is like filler?
Yeah, I will say I don't feel like episode 2 is 100%. It's not as good as the setup in the first, and yeah, I think there is a fair amount of filler there.
I think what is going on is that you have the crew sort of split up in a way that they aren't in other episodes. So they have to like figure out, okay, so these two guys are doing something, and they take the lion's share of the attention. So what are the other people going to be doing during this time? You know, so they come up with this like, okay, we'll just make this weird time travel mechanism happen.
And Odo was there.
Right. And like the reason that they sort of like in the first episode, they talk about like, well, we're not going to beam down to this fancy restaurant or this fancy dinner because of like Miles is like, I'm not going to dress up and do fancy dinners. And Noto's like, I'm not in Starfleet. You know, it's like, it's just very, very transparent in how they're just trying to like group people off. It's very similar to Picard that way.
And we gave Armin Shimmerman presumably a contractual obligation here.
Hopefully he filmed that during another episode. It wasn't in
I'm
the
in the
chair.
episode getting that check.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I was like, man, he had to be there for like 8 hours of makeup for this like 30-second scene. But that's probably exactly what they did. You're right.
That's a really interesting point from it to say, because I've wondered about that guy ever since I saw that episode. Like this singularity, it messed with a lot of stuff.
You're muted.
Justin, you're
Justin,
muted.
you're muted.
the next question I had, if nobody gets out of the sanctuary district, why does Dick Miller's character assume that Cisco's deja vu is related to a past stay in the sanctuary district?
Is it absolutely no one gets out or almost no one gets out, I guess?
I would go with almost no one, but
Because
we
then
don't
I
really
guess you
know.
could maybe imagine that he got out one time and was one of the lucky few. It also
But-
seems like a
yeah.
lot of people were like very delusional about how the sanctuary cities actually worked.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Like,
it
there
feels
was a
like
lot
it's worse. Like it used to possibly work a lot better. And that just kind of got run down.
Yeah, and as you see, like in the background I've got going on here is from Picard season 2, and Raffi's in Los Angeles sanctuary district, and that seems to be more open air where people are coming in and out. So I guess it could be more like, yeah, a different sanctuary district in another city where you spent some time, and now like the San Francisco one is like hardcore. It's Alcatraz.
Maybe they bust some people over so they didn't have to think about them. Just moving them around from district to district.
Well, that
Toronto's
sounds familiar.
really something.
Would any other main character besides Dax have been as lucky as she was to end up rubbing elbows with high society and being able to just, kind of not exactly fail upwards, but continuously make things better?
Well, I think being incredibly hot helped for sure. So, like, I feel like Kira would have had a shot, but I don't know that any of the other main cast is quite on either of their levels.
Well,
Kira
like
would have broken someone.
Dax is incredibly experienced, has like hundreds of years of experience in situations in which they're unfamiliar. So I'm not surprised that they had figured out the situation so quickly. But also, it also speaks to how arbitrary the placement of someone in high society versus a sanctuary city is. It's just a matter of time and place and luck. And
Which
that's
is funny.
that's like
Yeah.
analogous to how class works.
Which is funny because they set it up that way because when they beamed in, their physical positions were literally juxtaposed, and yet they wound up on the opposite. I don't want to say rungs of the ladder, but like opposite levels of society.
That is very true, Norman. That is very
That's a good
true.
point.
Bringing that social conscience.
Because the way that Dax was approached versus how Cisco and Bashir were approached, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Why would the security that we see in the sanctuary cities also be doing the processing and sweeping the streets?
Bigger paycheck.
Well, they are understaffed and overworked, allegedly.
Yeah.
I get that, but still, they pick these guys up, and then the rest of the time we see these two guys just here doing guard duty.
Well,
It just seems odd.
yeah, it is kind of weird, isn't it? The processing part does kind of make sense because I guess functionally it's comparable to being arrested, right? But
suppose.
yeah, it is kind of weird that they seem to both be cops and guards.
I get the impression from this future and the one we live in that like there may be a plethora of jobs to do, but they're increasingly delegated to fewer and fewer people. So you have even in an office environment, you have like administrative folks doing the job of like maybe even 5 people. So I'm not surprised that it extends to government agencies as well. Like everybody in the sanctuary city is apparently unemployed. Like they could literally pluck anybody there to fill these roles and they don't,
But then they'd be entitled to something. And they don't want to give them anything.
Are there real world modern day allegories to the terms ghost, gimme, dim?
Yeah, like welfare queen is definitely, I think, the most common equivalent to a gimme for sure in terms of like commonly used bullshit phrases.
They must, like any sort of insular community, you're going to have jargon and things that sort of are shorthand for the experiences of the people in there that are stuck.
That is true.
Like
I did like when they said, "Oh, you know, we don't like to use those words. They're just the easiest way to explain what you are."
Yeah.
So
I
getting
think
more
even
in.
the officer
ahead,
was
Scott.
like, yeah, I think even the police officer was like, yeah, you know, she didn't want to use. No, that wasn't her, was it? It was the woman who's doing the processing. He didn't want to use those words. It just, yeah.
Yeah, the like social worker lady.
So getting more into the meat of this episode, for me, this scene between Cisco and Bashir talking about like the nature of how fucked up things really are. I feel like this is the best scene in all of Star Trek. What do you guys think about it?
I think it's definitely up there.
I liked it, and also it was nice because this is possibly the first time I can remember where it was set a little bit in our future, so it wasn't commenting on something we'd already kind of worked through in our own lives. It was something that was more contemporary in our future. So it's kind of like, you're going to have to deal with this yourselves one day, kids.
And what did we do? We just kind of stuck around until we got to this.
We took it as a challenge and decided to literally do it.
Except now, instead of sanctuary districts, we let people set up encampments and then send the police to chase them away and steal all of their stuff. Yay! No ration cards either. Awesome.
I guess like these are conversations people like Windgrace mentioned. We have conversations with ourselves and other people about this very exact same thing, and what it shows is the futility of those conversations, because outside of being, there's like the part of you that's frustrated, like, oh, why are things like this, and it's like, well, there's systemic reasons for it, and because you don't have the power to make the kind of change necessary all alone necessarily, like you have to figure out how you're going to exist within it. I felt like this conversation was a little strange to me because like Bashir, like it's almost like Cisco was trying to placate Bashir about what was going on there a little bit, like yeah, it's bad, but that's just the way things are. But like
things are going to get better because of this.
Well, we know Bashir was kind of oblivious, because when he showed up at Deep Space Nine, he's like, oh yeah, the frontier, I'm going to do some good work here. He's a very sheltered kind of guy.
That's one of the few things that sort of help like pierce the veil of the suspense of disbelief a little bit, that Bashir would be this ignorant of Earth history. If he was an alien, maybe, but like a human that's completely oblivious to what's going on like a century or two beforehand, like our history, is biased and prejudiced and horrible, but like we're aware of some things that happened in the past, like 100 or 2 years ago. For it to be this walled off from the past is like, it's hard for me to swallow.
Yeah, especially since, I mean, he's a Middle Eastern character. If they're trying to say that the world has become so progressive that he has no idea what was going on with his ancestors, I honestly don't buy that.
And though it would end up being retconned as an answer, I mean, at this point in his character, he's playing dumb still to make people think he's not as smart as he is. But the first time I saw this episode, before that was even a thing that was introduced, I was like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense at all.
I guess they overplayed that hand a little bit. There's a narrative reason for it, because you need somebody in the story to sort of give some background to what exactly is happening in this part of the timeline. So you need to have someone to be like, I don't know what's happening, and then someone to explain it to them. Because if we get that information piecemeal, that with the time allotted, that would be a frustrating process.
Yeah. I feel like they could have handled a little better for sure by like making him say something like, I knew they had sanctuary districts, but I had no idea they were like this, and then have Cisco like launch into the more in-depth explanation. But it definitely does like reflect poorly on Bashir for him to just be completely clueless and ignorant.
I'm trying to remember. Did he not even know who Kirk was in Trials and Tribulations? Or was that someone else?
No, I think he did.
Did he? Oh, okay. I'm thinking maybe he's just completely, utterly clueless about history for some reason.
He was really into tennis and really into medicine and nothing else.
And
no
chasing women.
And like what purpose would that ignorance serve here story-wise exactly, other than to be the exposition machine for Cisco, because
that's it.
Right, there's no like there's nothing that Bashir gains from being like, duh, I don't get it,
There's no other good character to put down there who is also human aside from O'Brien, and they needed him to do the weird chronoton stuff.
Like, enough.
It's apparent that there's some sort of like behind the scenes restrictions as to why certain things plot wise are a little top heavy.
So as far as impactful scenes with people that just kind of don't get it, how out of touch are the elites that Jadzia ends up?
They might as well be on a different planet.
About as out of touch as any elites, honestly. Like, I feel like that's very comparable to real life. Like, yeah, they're completely clueless. They're totally absorbed in their own lives. Everything's going fine for them, so they're really not concerned about anyone who things aren't going fine for.
Like, at any sort of introduction of the idea that the people that are disrupting what they believe is a peaceful life, to entertain that there's some sort of point that they're making, would sort of disrupt their entire way of life. So it's better just to dismiss it entirely and focus on their life. Well, I'm traveling, and it was just so out of touch. And that to me is incredibly realistic, to have absolutely no idea about how anybody else lives.
If you could just give everyone a Pepsi, we'd get along.
They can all buy the world of Coke and
man.
Like it's and I love that they include sort of like the totem policing component of sort of like the disruption. Like, protest is meant to disrupt things so that there's an urgent attention paid to it, and they're like, well, if they just like calm down or whatever. It's like, how do you calm down about starving and being like imprisoned? How does that work? So
yeah, very much drenched in just world fallacy. Like, the only reason you'd be there is if you deserve to be there.
That's a good question, Norman. I don't know. I mean, like, our sense of fashion hasn't evolved a lot from the 90s, to be honest.
No one would dress like that, though.
I mean, of course there's like little bits of fashion, but it hasn't moved in the same way that it did before that. We're still a lot of just t-shirts and jeans people, and we haven't moved from that a lot. And then, but the like high society, they've always had a little bit going on. I feel like this is still just a 90s view of sometime in an anytime future.
Do you want to talk the thing I mentioned, like when I was watching it, in the chat? That one bit of 90s cultural appropriation I'd completely forgot about until Chris talked about how he had like
the Maori
tattoo.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was such a 90s thing for douche bros, wasn't it?
Oh man.
That, like, just like a string of barbed wire.
That was so funny.
And what a pivot, he's like all proper with his collar and like suit jacket. Like, he's not rocking the tribal no more. Like, that's such a,
yeah. He's exactly the kind of guy who would be like raised extremely privileged, wants to like act out and be cool and like look like he's like a rebel, and then immediately like, well, back to business, gotta make the money.
So a thing that I had never noticed until this watch through this week, And we coined a new term. We'll get to that in just a second. Everyone that's like above the poor people status that we see in the sanctuaries, even the normal, like the cops and stuff, everybody's got this like choker kind of thing going around their neck that's separate from the rest of their garment. It's not a tie. It's not like part of their shirts. There's these different ones. And Scott, what was the word you came up with for this?
Let me show you.
Cravascots. Not quite a cravat. Not quite an ascot.
Mascot.
Mm-hmm.
But same thing here with, and you will not convince me that this dude standing next to the I want to call her interrogator, but no, the negotiator.
There we go.
Tell me that's not Ian McKellen, because
Right?
fuck, it looks just like him. It's his brother.
Oh, I can kind of see it. It's the
He
nose.
didn't have a line though.
I'm gonna
Nope, he didn't.
make a wild guess here in terms of like what they're trying to convey emotionally with this wardrobe choice, and that's like a restriction
Oh.
that like voices are being restricted. I know that's like a little bit literal, but that's just a thought I had.
That's not bad.
I was also thinking it could indicate like they have disposable income to buy just extra fabric for no reason.
Yeah, but even like these guys, the cops
money.
and the, like the normal working blue collar people also have a collar.
I what I find interesting about the rich folks versus the poor folks or sanctuary folks is that nowadays rich folks are sort of like undercover rich, like they'll try to cosplay as people that are of a lower status, so to have like a visual indicator of wealth, because like they talk about being targeted for robberies and that kind of thing, they're not terribly concerned about it. Really speaks to how they're not concerned about revolution, because they're willing to be public with their status.
So moving away from status symbols and cravascots, here's a time loop, break your brain kind of question. Did Gabriel Bell ever participate in the riots, or was it always Cisco?
That's something I was wondering too. And even
Do we ever see pictures of Bell before this episode?
No.
No, I think
No.
Cisco just mentions him by name.
I do think it's funny that they got a picture of Cisco somewhere. Did they take his picture when they were like logging him into stuff? Like,
No,
Yeah,
because he was
probably.
in uniform at
No,
the
because
time.
he's wearing the clothes he
Oh.
traded, so it wasn't when
Yeah.
he was being processed.
Somebody was just walking around with a camera. It's like, oh, I'm gonna take a picture of that guy.
I was trying to figure that out too.
I mean,
And
I
that's-
guess I could buy that. Like, there's a surveillance state and a bunch of cameras, but like, I guess not enough cameras to like stop the riot from happening. So,
Hey, Tanya.
I do also think it's a little funny that they're like, this was the most deadly thing in American civil rights history, and I'm like, that's not true.
Hey, Dell.
There have been
Don't bring
way,
up.
way bloodier rights-based conflicts in this country. Like, what?
Well, I think there's a social reason to paint it that way. And it's sort of like a way to dissuade people from attempting it again, because revolution is a very violently, it's a very upturning type of thing. So I think there's like the victor is the person who writes the story of history. So I would just think it would be in the Federation's best interest to be like, that was really super violent. Let's not do that again.
It's very hard to say at this point what the original timeline is supposed to be, because this is supposed to be, if you go by TOS, like 30 years removed from the eugenics wars. But then flip it over to Strange New Worlds, like, no, that got pushed back for some reason because, Federation stuff. Personally, I think this might entirely have been influenced by, Voyager's trip to 1996.
Ooh.
Well, and then
So
you have
here's-
Picard walking around 5 months before this. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so a related question I had is, what is with 2024 as a year in Trek? You've got the Picard, all of Picard season 2, you've got the Bell Riots episodes, and you've also got tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow in Strange New Worlds.
Well, Picard and Strange New Worlds make sense because they're both trying to save money by just shooting modern
Right.
era, modern stuff. But here they did like construct all of the costumes and sets and make it look like distinct. So I don't know. I guess when it was made, it was the sort of semi distant future. What, like 30-ish years?
they're like, we won't be making Star Trek by then.
Star Trek in 30 years.
I felt like Picard was a pretty realistic portrayal of LA. Like, they call them sanctuary cities, but here there are blocks that are filled with encampments that are sort of shuffled around depending on the police presence. If you go to Beverly Hills, for example, you'll never see an encampment because they are violently pushing people out. It's sort of like a sort of Vatican City type rule over there. It's like its own incorporated thing. So I felt like Picard sort of portrayed it accurately, at least visually. Narratively speaking, though, I don't know. But in San Francisco, it's the sort of militant separation, the ghettoizing is much more armed force enforced. Whereas now it's very like, it's systemic, it's redlining, it's rents that are astronomical. A third of homeless people, especially in Los Angeles, are employed. They simply cannot afford to live here. So it's like, it's not a matter like, and whereas in the sanctuary cities, they are like removed from being able to earn anything to house themselves, even if they wanted to. So it's just an open air prison. And I
Totally
would
not
say
Gaza.
like it's mainly a semantic difference, but I would say it's pretty on the nose. It's pretty on the nose.
Yeah, so I guess this just gets us into probably the biggest question we have all day. How does this compare to the current state of homelessness in America, and in particular, California?
It feels like an 80s sci-fi writer is writing about the current day. Like the person who would write like Escape from New York or something is looking at our textbooks and writing about it.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, this graphic that I've got up right now, I put together 2 weeks ago out of a real article from NBC News, and it's like, it's
Right.
scary how fucking close this is to this episode.
Because one of the sort of like signals that fascism is on its way is when the people that are the most marginalized are being shuffled arbitrarily from one place to another. In this very episode or set of episodes, they talk about like how you basically lose track of people within this system, the sanctuary city system. Like they kind of go into this black hole. And the only reason that Dax is able to track down Cisco and Bashir is because she has somebody in a high place, So it's like being able to keep track of houseless people is notoriously difficult, and that's by design. And they're also being bussed from one part of the country to the other on purpose. It's pretty, there are differences, but they're semantic mainly. It's pretty dead on.
Yeah, and what Norman's saying, that's like the most unfortunate thing well, maybe not the most unfortunate thing to come out of the Supreme Court this year, but one of them for sure.
And by the way, California governor has committed to enforcing that Supreme Court decision. So you are correct. Their sanctuary cities seem to be like on the horizon, if not already, systemically.
Yeah, I've talked about this before, but I used to call these episodes Trump's second term. And it's really unfortunate that it didn't even take Trump for a second term. We got a friggin' Democrat in the White House. You've got a Democrat governor there in California.
We have a
And
Democratic
it's
governor,
worse.
Democratic mayor, who was a community organizer, who was, committed to housing the houseless and providing services, and that has not come to fruition whatsoever. There's some services, but as far as housing, like there's vouchers, but their wait time is insane. And again, the cost of living here is ridiculous. So it's just not improving.
No, it's getting worse. It's really bad in Washington too, and we're also like a very blue state. And in Seattle, like encampments spring up all the time, and then they're just violently removed. And the other thing is like they just throw people's things away. They're supposed to like give them an opportunity to like sort through their stuff and like prevent that from happening, but they don't do that. And so a lot of the time they throw away people's documents, and so then people have to like go through the process of trying to get documents with no money and no documents. And it's just horrible, and it's so like openly evil that it sometimes just feels like surreal and fake. And it's also more expensive than just providing housing.
Because they want a guaranteed prison population, because guess what, there's a loophole for in our Constitution in the United States anyway. You can't enslave someone unless they're in prison. So there's that.
Also where they make a whole bunch of stupid things illegal, like loitering laws first came into existence like shortly after the end of slavery.
Right. And also, there's a lot of, in LA, the way people discuss this issue is so dehumanizing. It's just sort of like this. It's not a person, it's a problem. I wish this problem would be out of my sight, out of sight, out of mind. Like, and it
So
is in
is it
Beverly
like
Hills.
the elites in this episode, or worse
Yes,
than that?
incredibly. I would say it's dead on.
It's also
Dead
not
on.
even just the elites. It's also people who are like one missed paycheck away from being those people who are like that, which is absolutely wild. Like one of my friends, her boyfriend, like just openly said in a conversation just casually that he thinks we should just like euthanize all the homeless people. And I just like my jaw hit the floor. Like I couldn't believe it. And he just like was shocked that I was shocked. Like it was such a normal, like casual thing for him to say.
They're regarded as litter, like not even human, just litter that needs to be pushed out of sight. It's incredibly dehumanizing. And the thing is, like, there's plenty of space, plenty of housing around. They're just, being priced out of everything.
Yeah, I think it says a lot about like our commitment to making people terrified not to work, that we're willing to spend considerably more money just like throwing people away than taking care of them. Like it blows my mind.
That
like
speaks to the points that Bashir brought up too. Like, why don't they treat these people like humans?
Yeah,
and it's like because they aren't treating them like humans. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the look at that from out on the left coast, because I mean Scott and I come from the two states that actually have the least amount of unhoused homeless. There's at least shelters and stuff. The only people that are pretty much on the streets here in Maine and Vermont are the people that literally choose to, that will not take the help. And I'm not saying anything bad about them, just pretty much what we've got left are the absolute people that will not take the help.
And also there's like a limit to
winter though. Like Saskatchewan has basically no homeless population because the winters are so cold that if you're living outside, you're not living anymore.
Yeah. The thing is, like, it also begs the question of what is the extent of liberty that you must have a job, that you must have an address, that, like to have to work within those confines. Sort of, it's contradictory to, American spirit. Like, oh, we're supposed to be able to live however we want to, but we have to have a job. We have to have an address. We have to have a car, Why can't we just exist? We didn't ask to be born.
I guess
Okay.
if anything is going to add any discomfort or getting out of the comfort zone for somebody that's already there, they're not going to do it.
Well, the wild thing is, though, like, that's what fucks me up is we have enough money to just, like, fix this problem without really taking anything noticeable away from anyone. Like,
Yeah, all it would take is
Mhm.
not shipping a cluster of bombs to fucking Israel or something.
yeah.
Right. It
Maybe
has to be a
maybe-
zero-sum game. It has to be a zero-sum game in order for this to occur, because the rich folks have to assume that, well, my life is going to be impacted negatively, so I can't possibly let these people have freedom, even though that's not really for me to give.
Or you're getting told it's
Mhm.
going to make your life harder, even if it's not. You're getting scared
Yeah.
that it will.
It's just really interesting seeing how upset a lot of Americans get at the idea of anyone getting anything for free. Like, whether they need it, whether they deserve it, like, they just, like, a lot of people just get, like, really, really upset at the idea of someone getting something that they don't get, even if they don't need it. Like, it's just very fascinating and strange.
It happens between generations as well. Like, I suffered in order to accomplish this thing or have this goal. I need to work 80 hours a week to have this apartment. Why don't they have to do that? And it's like, you're almost getting it. You're almost getting it, because neither
Better
should
suffer
you.
for no reason. It's
Yes.
like you suffer for no reason anyway.
So, breaking away from the real serious stuff that we just got into, what do you think about the view of the internet from 1994's perspective? I got your email, buddy.
I love it. Yeah, it's great. Great
Just give it
interface.
years, Windows 95 would have been a thing.
Yeah.
No, not even. I mean, the episode actually came out just after New Year's in '95, but it was filmed and done in '94. So this is before that even.
I also like the flip phone that had like a solar panel on it or something.
Does this look bigger than like a Starlink interface from 1996 and Future's End? Because wouldn't that mean it's 30 or so years later, but technology somehow got bigger?
It does also just make it very wacky with the Picard and Strange New Worlds 2024 episodes, because I guess everywhere but San Francisco has like technology, and then San Francisco has like brick computers.
Everywhere
Like,
except
capital of
closest
technology in
proximity
the
to
US.
Silicon Valley.
Ritter was just dumbing everything down so he could
I-
sell more stuff.
It looks like a point of sale interface more than a
Mhm.
interweb thing. I chuckle every time the net is referenced, because it sounds very similar to like the information superhighway kind of thing, like, or Netscape. It's giving very that. It gives like a 90s perspective on what the internet is. Maybe the net has to do with like the specific system that the intake process or whatever, or like the information that is stored about human beings and stuff, like the ID thing that they had to do for Dax. But it is very silly to me, like AOL kind of.
You've
But
got mail.
I wish they could have included that dial-up sound. I don't know.
Oh my
my
god,
God.
yes.
That
Or
would
done
missed
some
that.
a product integration and had like the Yahoo thing go off.
I'm not even sure if Yahoo was around by then.
Oh, maybe not.
Just about. Like, the web crawler and Ask Jeeves might have been.
Oh my gosh. Site, maybe?
Does that still have a floppy disk drive on it, or is that for something else?
Hard
a little
to
hole
tell.
there.
I mean, it does look like a slot.
Or it's a data tape
TOS
from TOS.
TOS had those.
Yeah. Oh my god.
iconic.
The one thing about this, though, it does kind of reinforce my belief that if this was happening in real life right now, it would actually be worse than what happened in the events of the episode because they did not predict social media. And that would have an absolutely detrimental effect on the riots because people would be fighting endlessly as to, first picking a side, then deciding everything that happened that was blamed on the other side did happen, and everything that they were going for didn't actually happen, not the way you thought it would. I mean, they're not predicting Photoshop either or deep fakes. Pardon me.
And the thing is, like, what's interesting about that is when they see the riots on television, they're like, oh, they're going to see this in China. So there is this like no access to instant information like that, like Twitter or whatever. And that has to be in the society by design. So when in this timeline, we are deliberately separated, even though there's this net that connects everybody.
So did the Romulans bring social media tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow?
That's a
Ooh,
good
damn.
question.
Zuck is a Romulan.
Zuck is a Romulan. Oh my god. Elon Musk is a fucking Gorn. We're gonna play that game.
It's a baby Gorn, though, not like full grown, but the baby one. Those guys.
Now, Windgrace, I know you got to get out of here soon. I've got a few more questions after, but I want to give you a chance to rate this out of 10 and say whatever you want to say overall about the episode.
One thing, there's a couple of things I noticed, but I found it funny at the end of the episode when they got back, they just left. Like, weren't they coming to Earth for a reason? They just flew away.
Well, we can't have that dinner now. They're too traumatized.
That's true. Yeah, we don't need to eat. We don't need to talk to the Department of Temporal Investigations. We'll just leave.
We had rations.
But I'd say, yeah, the first part was definitely the stronger. But I think overall it was probably, I'll probably say an 8.75.
Wow.
There was some stuff that fell apart a lot more in the second part, and especially the juxtaposition of the goofiness, I think, with the time travel stuff was a little like, I know it was probably supposed to break the tension, but sometimes it felt like it was a completely different episode.
Yeah, not a troll to be seen. I mean, where are their cute little belly buttons that you rub and make wishes?
Unless you count Clint Howard, who I know you wanted to bring up.
That was my next question. I just wanted to make sure that you can drop whenever you need to. But my next question is, are the scenes with Clint Howard just filler, or is this a way to highlight the dims?
I was actually just thinking about that. I think yes, because the dims are like brought up and then briefly shown in like one scene, whereas they're supposed to be kind of everywhere. It does feel a little bit like filler.
Maybe they should have spread him out a couple different times, but it's like they didn't know he was coming in till part 2.
I think it was Clint Howard's best performance until we got him in that most recent Strange New Worlds episode with Mbanga.
Oh yeah, the doctor.
Or,
I was thinking when the other one when he was like the Orion guy, but yeah.
That was pretty funny.
Oh, yeah.
He used Tilly drugs.
But yeah, I should be taking off now. But sorry to dip on
Thank
you guys.
sir.
But thanks for having me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Take
Couple
care.
more questions anyway.
all right.
You're telling me that Clint Howard and Carbonite maneuver didn't do it for you? Because
No. That episode as a whole doesn't do it for me. I mean, the ending is with Clint Howard is
Really?
probably the best part of the episode, but I don't really like the episode as a whole.
so interesting, because I
It's not like
consider it
TOS's
like a
worst
classic.
episode or anything, but
No. Not at all.
like versus most
like-
of Star Trek, it's only okay.
I mean, it does
Oh.
work as a decent setup to give Kirk something to use to bluff the Romulans away in a later episode, but other than that, I don't know.
Yeah, I do like the Corbomite maneuver as a bluff as a whole, but not. I just that episode it just doesn't do it for me.
Classic for me. So interesting.
Not part of the I Love Bad Star Trek episodes, so that's great. I mean, I wouldn't put it there either. I don't think it's that bad. Just like versus the rest of Star Trek, it's only okay.
Right.
So the last things that I had to talk about here, well, I guess we'll do this one, is Dick Miller's transformation from the uncaring, ultra mega, fuck all of you, to kind of getting it by the end realistic.
I mean, it might not be totally realistic in the sense of it being likely to like happen often, but I can see how if you work a job like that where where your job is to basically treat people like trash, the only way to really like do that job is to put yourself in a mind space where you start to believe that that's true so you can justify
Right.
your actions. And I think when someone is, when you're confronted with someone else's humanity to the degree that he was during the like hostage situation, I think it's a lot harder to keep that like mask of ignorance in place. So I do
Yeah.
think it's realistic on that level, but I think a lot of people fight very, very hard to stay ignorant.
That is the words for it too. That people do fight hard to stay ignorant in our modern day.
I mean, consider other officers in similar positions of power, like SS guards or people with that amount of say over whether someone is alive or not. I got the impression throughout the episode that he was basically there to do a job. He didn't really have like an emotional connection, and he basically told himself enough propaganda and ate it enough to sort of do the job. But once he was confronted with the consequences of that job and had somebody explain it to him, it seemed to turn him around. So I guess like if there were other stakes to his betrayal other than simply walking away from the position, that his like if there was like a fear-based reason for him not to change his mind, it might be a little bit different. But it seemed like
because jobs
there
are hard
is
to come by, and if he
right.
quits his job, he could end up in the sanctuary districts just like them.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's a good point.
I guess they had to have a character do this. They just chose one that is a little. It's not as. It's hard to buy.
Yeah, I definitely, if it had been his subordinate, the other dude that was with him, I wouldn't have questioned it because he seemed a little more malleable to what was going on.
Yeah, he just wanted.
And he
to
definitely was a little more indifferent at minimum. We're like, yeah,
Mhm.
he just wanted to get home to his wife and kids. Like whatever happens, as long as he doesn't die.
Right.
Very complacent guy.
Like it doesn't. It sounds like this gentleman did a lot of work to sort of avoid the philosophical implications or the moral implications of what he was doing, because you hear Picard say things like what kind of things are done in the name of was following orders.
Oh my gosh.
So, and I'm sure that like being in this position, he has witnessed and taken part in horrible things. So
I think the contrast between the officers and the social worker was also really interesting because she obviously did see them as human beings immediately. And I think my favorite part about the second part of the episode was when she talks about the one time she did try to help someone, almost got fired for it, and then kind of stopped doing that out of fear, like bending the rules and things like that. And I thought that was like really interesting. And I also liked the contrast that like the person who cared and like saw them as human beings was a Black woman, and the people who like didn't see them as human beings were white dudes.
Yeah.
Wearing little eagles on their chest,
Yeah.
reminiscent of the Third Reich and all that.
it's like that scene in Mitchell and Webb where they have the hats with the skull and crossbones, and they're like, it's like a World War II-ish type scene, and they're like, "Are we the bad guys? Are we?" Because the skull and crossbones doesn't look great, and
If you have to ask.
Okay, then the last thing I had, it's just two questions from the episode itself, from Bashir, the last two kind of things that he says. How do
Oh,
we stop
God.
this from happening again? How did we let things get so bad?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I think the only way to stop stuff like this from happening is to basically recreate society from the bottom up in a way that's built on like compassion and ensuring that everyone has what they need to survive and thrive, as opposed to based on competition and ensuring that there's always haves and have nots. So I feel like the Star Trek universe is at least on the right track in terms of giving people a lot more in the way of resources. We're kind of fucked though, so.
Oh yeah.
I think what is necessary is to sort of create that in real time, to sort of reach out and create community and do that in real time. Be that resource if you can be a resource. Rely on community if you're in need, not assuming that nobody can be there for you, because individualistic stuff is what creates this issue, because it becomes like a scarcity thing. Like, they can't have things because I need all the things, or I need to protect what I have and I can't share it. So
Mutual aid, baby.
Yeah. Like, I know what I'm calling myself here, but I also know that I heard somewhere that at this point in history, the wealth disparity between the richest people in the world and the poorest is about the same as it was just before the French Revolution.
Mm.
I feel like it's gotta be
And
worse. Like, they have so much money.
with how much money we're funneling to, military aid and not giving to these programs, it's grotesque. It's grotesque to keep investing in this system. Something's got to give.
It's extra crazy to have people, like, on one hand be like, I'm pro-life, save the children, but then they're like, oh no, we can't spend this money feeding children, we need to spend it bombing children.
Right.
Like,
we make this like moral dilemma of like, how could we possibly help other people? They're just inherently bad, or like there has to be divisiveness. You have to say, well, these people are bad and these people are good and these people are virtuous and these people are amoral. Like drug addiction, be like the way that it's treated in this country is disgusting, and completely neglecting the fact that like the reason that people do it is because it's like, what's less safe than being in public and being asleep, and that creates mental illness, and it just snowballs. So it's like, we have to get at the root of the issue, which is just not hoarding resources and distributing it equally.
it's always crazy to me that people like Elon Musk still have so many defenders, because I just, like, it's one of those moments where you're like, oh, this human is having just like a fundamentally different human experience than I am, because I cognitively don't understand how you can see a person like that who has so much money, like so much money that when you try to quantify it, you need like ridiculous graphics that require immense scrolling to like get like how much money he has compared to like everyone else. And
yeah, Twitter could go under and he ends up losing all of that 44 billion, and he'll still be the richest motherfucker in the world.
It makes me so angry. And
like the thing is, like, I think it's also the sort of untouchableness of people in the elite. We can't possibly comprehend how much $1 billion is. Don't feed the children while they're at school. Why?
It depends on what state you're in, because one thing I will say, my state and a bunch of states very recently within the last couple of years have started actually making lunch and breakfast free. They are here in Maine at least.
And on the other hand, there's some places that will totally like call CPS or, have some sort of punitive repercussion if you're not, paid up on your lunch balance. And it's like, we're going back to the days where if you're in debt, you're in jail kind of thing. And I think that's a real huge red flag.
But also
totally bring those back.
Your kid, which is absolutely wacko. Like, so I've never been in an economic position where I needed free lunch, but I did have an absentee sometimes parent who like worked crazy hours and often just forgot to write the check for several days sometimes. And so I would find out by like getting my lunch, getting the like lunch that everyone else had. I would go to check out. They would say I had no money in my account. They would throw that food in the garbage and give me a bologna sandwich. Like
What in the
and that's like
actual
what they would do
fuck?
every time to everyone. If you didn't have money, you got your like sad little bologna sandwich so that everyone could see that you didn't have money. And it just sucks. It sucks. It just
That is
I
terrible.
think about it often, like whenever this conversation comes up, and I
Like,
just think about how like it made me feel bad, but I can't imagine how much worse it made kids who that happened to all the time feel like
Yeah.
it's so fucked up. Like
Poverty
it's so
is
evil.
meant to
Just feed the
poverty in America
children.
or in the Americas is meant to be the most humiliating thing you could possibly be, to be impoverished. To be without money is the most humiliating thing, because then to have to depend on other people, to have to depend on community, to have to ask for help is the most shameful freaking thing. And to like put that on a child
It's
is
vile.
is violent.
Wow. Those are some stories. I know we talked about this a little bit already, but I will ask this one final question. Do you think we're better off in the real world in 2024 right now, or do you think the limited look that we've had between treks at 2024 is better? Which is better?
At least they get ration cards in Star Trek. Like, it's really bad.
Away from the very real possibility of Project 2025.
You know, there is, as horrible as this future is, there is some social safety nets that they sort of like create in this episode that are like, gosh, it would be nice to even have that. To like, but on the other hand, it's much more punitive. So I would say like, again, the differences are mainly semantical. I think we're about the same.
Yeah, there's positives and negatives. It's a gray area on both sides for sure.
They did have a single doctor as well, which like is
Ooh.
not the case in real life.
Yeah, I guess that's better than a lot of the homeless get right now.
And they had like buildings they were allowed to occupy, as opposed to like police violently like breaking up squats the way they do.
Like, Bashir was the one who had to go to the clinic and get that thing for the hypoglycemic lady.
Right.
Like, you know, it's like she even has a job and she still can't go to the doctor. That's so real.
Who said it? Yeah, I think it was Vonnegut that said, we're going to be the first species that kills ourselves off because saving it wasn't cost effective.
Oh, yeah.
That is, yeah, yep. I mean, it's true of climate change too. Like, what the fuck? I hate rich people. I hate them so much. Like, I used to try never to wish anyone dead, but I do wish all of these people a very guillotine. Like,
the out of touch with humanity thing, it really speaks to how there is like a deal with the devil being made. Like, you have to sell your soul in order to attain a certain amount of privilege and wealth, and to be disconnected entirely from human suffering on this scale, that your soul is gone. Your soul is gone.
I think there's something so like Faustian about it too, because by selling their soul, they become so empty. It's like why they're so like desperate for the excess. It's why Elon Musk is so desperate to be liked. Like, he wants so bad for like all of this like love and admiration that's just not going to happen. And it's like eating him alive, even though he has everything he could ever possibly want and more. Like,
All right, well, that's all the questions I have. Do you guys have anything that you want to ask before we do our out of 10s?
Bell Riots wed.
What would you like? what do you think they ate instead of the dinner that they were scheduled to have? Like, would the just the replicated food on the ship, or they hit up a Wendy's? Like,
That is a good question. Like I hadn't thought about the fact that they just fucked off at the end. They didn't do the whole thing with Starfleet or anything.
We've had a
Just nope,
stressful
we're going
couple
back to
days.
DS9.
I remember this when I summarize it.
I bet they stopped by a Wendy's.
Yeah. Hit a
I
drive-through.
could see Cisco getting some spicy nugs.
God, those things are so much better than they have any right to be.
They're
I gotta
so
be honest.
good.
For just their Wendy's nuggets dipped in some
oh,
random sauces. Oh my god, they're
oh,
freaking great.
Gannon brings up a point here. What did everybody think about the hostage situation? Like, especially the guy that ran it, because I thought, like, for someone that was trying to have control, he didn't really have a lot of it.
I love the irony that he was played by a guy whose apparent stage name was Frank Military.
Oh, that's really funny.
But for someone who seemed like, like a ghost who's like crazy and ready to do anything, he was, surprisingly willing to compromise with what Cisco wanted to do and with Webb. And I don't know, he seemed a little too reasonable to have like started this whole hostage situation.
A little bit all
Especially
talk, kind of
early
like,
in
oh
the
no, now what do we do? Oh good, Daddy's here. Here you go, Pops. Help me.
Right, because at first I thought, maybe they were just trying really hard to not make it a bloody thing, because this could have been very bloody. And I guess in the Bell Riots, it's a non-violent hostage situation, so they wanted to make sure to keep it that way. But I think it's actually to the story's detriment, because the stakes are basically like, we have hostages, but they sort of like shove them against the wall if they toss, give a little too much lip, but that's about it. No one's losing a finger.
So you're saying it was not a Sunday bloody Sunday.
Very nice.
Or like a Saturday bruised Saturday.
Oh no, it would be a Sunday, wouldn't it?
It would be starting on Sunday. That's the first.
Oh wow, damn it.
That's the first day that they actually like the Bell gets killed, or they barricade themselves in the sanctuary. All right, let's talk about some out of 10s. I'm giving this a solid 10, even though it does have problems. But versus the rest of Star Trek, man, it is still one of the best episodes there ever has been. And like I said, just even that one scene with Bashir and Cisco just talking about how things got so fucked up and how we got from here to there, and would we repeat that? It's just some incredible stuff that gets you thinking. So for that alone, I think both episodes are worth the 10s, despite, like, if this was other episodes that didn't have that scene, I would probably only rank this like an 8.5, because it does have some problems.
I'm probably putting it at like a 9 or 9.5. It was really good. I feel like I forget how good it is till I go back and watch it, and I'm like, whoa, that's really good. But yeah, I agree that the episode had some problems, and I think a lot of the ending kind of muddles the message a little bit, and I don't know, I think it could have a stronger resolution, but the first half is so good that it shoots it way up there.
Okay. Putting them together, that word, apparently. Yeah, I'll give it a solid 9.5. There's some of it, feels a little bit like filler. And the social commentary, there's a lot of it. You talk about the scene where, Bashir's talking about how things could get this way. That could apply to multiple scenes. There's a lot of social commentary. And as I said on Saturday when I watched it, like, I wouldn't call it heavy-handed, but the hand is definitely putting on weight. Like that very last scene where Bashir's like, how could they let things get so bad? And then the camera moves in on Cisco, and you have to expect him to look right at it as he says, I don't know.
Computer, delete that entire log.
But yeah, 9.5, easy.
Mine, it's sort of a 9 because there's like a lot of things that haven't already been said before in more adept ways. It's very Dickensian. You have like the people that are scrimping and scraping by and just trying to survive, and then there's the people that are obviously very thriving under the system that can't be bothered. And I think that theme within Star Trek, though, I think they did it very well. Um, and also sort of explaining how things got this way. But again, it's not something that we as the audience, even in the 90s, don't already know. So what I was hoping for with this episode was like, beyond the riots, beyond the violence, because the riots are really just like the first step to change. Like what comes after that? Like how does society organize itself after the upheaval? And for some reason, Star Trek really does not want to talk about that. They talk about the eugenics wars. They talk about the nuclear, thing going on, the nuclear fallout,
Nuclear
and
vessels.
yes, vessels, and this. But they talk about like those hallmarks of the Trek timeline, but they don't really talk about like what comes afterward, how United Earth came to be, because this is about as divided as you could possibly make a world. So I was hoping for that, but and there's also some dialogue that I thought was really weird, that seemed to sort of pad this out, like the time travel thing was a overplayed hand, and also the sort of dialogue during the hostage situation where the hostage taker was like, oh, you play football, or oh, baseball, I actually play. Like, who cares? Like, this is not important. But anyway, I feel like there's some things holding this back from being great, mainly. But I do think it's very solid and necessary social commentary.
Yeah, following up on that, one thing that I really would have liked to have seen as a scene is when O'Brien and Kira come back from one of their like, oh well, they weren't in this time, and they're like, well, I've read about Earth history and I've never heard of anything that rough. Like, I wanted to see that. I want to know what was so rough down there.
But also that's followed up by the fact that they literally get to the right time on their last try because O'Brien guessed. Like, you got a 1 in 3 shot here.
He is the most important officer in all of Star Trek history.
He made the Bell Riot. He saved everybody, and the Bell Riots happened. He saved the future.
Right, like the Federation was completely destroyed from existence, and then it popped back. But it was like, we're just back to normal now.
We got back here, and thankfully the time was back to the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, there are a little bit of conveniences, but my God, just the one scene between Sisko and Bashir. It's one of the best moments in all of TV, and it washes away the rest of the sins of these episodes. And yeah, we talked about this a little bit, Tanya, earlier, that Dax, like, she definitely, because she has boobs and some nice tattoos,
he was definitely trying to
got
hit
better
it.
treatment.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Let's be real. If we stumbled on Dax or Bashir, I don't think he would have been nearly as helpful. I think he'd have been like, security.
Though I just thought about this, why is a dude that's that rich and like owns a TV station, why is he taking public transportation?
Maybe he's also doing that thing where he cosplays as like a down-to-earth everyman.
Then he wouldn't be wearing the super nice suit and stuff while he did it.
The thing is, like, the way that she was positioned, it looked like he saw her from the street. So he probably saw her like walking down the way, which is, another sort of stretch. It's like this person is suddenly so invested in the safety of this complete stranger, which again it speaks to, and his attraction to her can be the only reason, because like rich people don't just do that, clearly.
All right, any other final thoughts?
everybody is one bad day away from being disabled. Everybody is just a couple circumstances away from being houseless. You know, if you see someone without housing or dealing with some sort of mental health crisis or something, you know, that is a mirror that should be looked at.
But despite what it said in The Killing Joke, you are not just one bad day from becoming the Joker.
Ooh. So, speaking of other fun franchises, we're going to take next week off because that's Labor Day, and none of you are going to be watching anyway. You're all going to be watching baseball, getting drunk, having burgers and hot dogs.
But
Maybe.
Bokai, though.
Okay. Oh man, those 15 Kings. There is no better team than the 15 Kings. But after that, we will be back to I was going to say Sundays from now, but this is our new time. We will be here on Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern, every week from now on. We're going to do a comparison series in September where every week we're going to compare Star Trek to other sci-fi. And we're going to start with Star Wars because, I mean, everybody's seen at least a couple of movies there. We might not get into every little detail because, by God, the Star Wars franchise has, for something that was almost all movies till like 10 years ago, they sure have expanded their franchise into a lot of little nooks and crannies.
Yeah,
I definitely haven't seen it all, and I'm not.
Is this a
planning on it.
size comparison episode?
Yes, this is a direct size comparison.
They wish they had 900 something episodes and however many movies.
And after that, we're gonna do classic Quantum Leap. We're gonna do
Nice.
Doctor Who, I guess.
Oh yeah.
One of you two are going to be running that because I've never even seen the episodes. I think that would be a great thing to cover. And Battlestar Galactica to wrap up the month. So
Yeah, boy.
get your lightsabers ready and take off your Kravascots, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. So I'd like to thank all of you guys that have shown up and talked about this for almost an hour and a half here. And I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. So thank everybody, and until we see you again in a couple weeks, live long and prosper.